All right, so it is now recording. Actually, let me confirm. Yeah. So today we're gonna do some stuff about graphics and how we can make these things work. Where's this coming from? So just open a new document, and we're gonna rebuild all this. So what you can start with is basically um, drop in populate 3D. Hold on, I'll turn on my bifocals so you can see the components. So the first one we're going to look at is how do you render points in Rhino. So let's work with populate 3D. Okay, so when you do populate 3D, you'll see this little box uh, show up here with all this, and I will open my Drawful Names. If you want to see full names on your components, you go to Display, and you see here Drawful Names. You click that, Drawful Names. Okay, so with region, so you can basically set your own region. Like you can either create some kind of bounding box on your own. So if I go in Rhino, I can make a little cube. I can come back in here. I can bring it in as a geometry, set one geometry, select the cube, and then you push the geometry into populate 3D, and it becomes your new bounding box within which it will populate a uh, random collection of points. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Uh, the other way you could do this is, so you don't use a preset geometry, it has its own default geometry. You can right click on region, you can select set one box, okay, and then it allows you to draw a box inside Rhino within which it will then populate a geometry. So this isn't super important, but I'm just showing you like how varied all the components are within Grasshopper. And then you can also change the count. You can change the seed. So the seed means what generation of random points you want in there. So if I was to go, oh, this is another way of bringing up a slider. You could go 0 dot 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 as many dots as you want. You can go 10, and then it'll create a slider for you within the 0 to 10. And then this is stepping with 1 because I didn't specify any decimal points. So anyways, you can specify how many points you want inside the random box with count. And then if you go into seed, you'll see how it changes. So seed 1 will always have the same configuration of random points within the same bounding box. Seed 2 will also have the same thing. There's no such thing as random in programming or Grasshopper. There's always a library that random is coming from. It's a formula, it's preset. There's no such thing as random. It's just random for you guys because it probably doesn't have a mathematical basis to what you're doing. So it's random, but it's always coming from a mathematical formula. And then these points as lists. So we're not bringing in a set of points, but anyways, so let's move on to what we need to do. So basically, what you can do is you can bring in this component. It's called dot display. Okay, this one here. This is a native Grasshopper component. And as soon as you plug it in, you can see how your points just kind of blow up. So within here, you have size. And right now it's at size 1. So that tells me that size 1 is a large size. So I'm going to make a slider. I'm going to go 0, dot, 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 as many dots as you want, 0 0.005, dot, 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 1. I want this to be my slider value. I want 3 decimal points. So I'm just kind of specifying a random 0.005. You could even go with 0.002. Whatever number you put in the middle is what the slider shows up at, but the bounds are what you put at the beginning and the end. Okay, and then I can put this into size, and then you can see how the size differs in your points like this. Okay, you can change the spherical nature, the size within here. So if you want to give this a different color, the points, you can select swatch. So color swatch is the most common way of picking colors. So you can double click on this, and then you have these sliders. You can change, you can select like whatever color you want. So this is using a color swatch. So this is one way. Now, within Rhino, why are we looking at this graphical stuff? So this is so you guys can speed up your workflow. You don't have to take things always into editing software. You can literally just take screenshots from here, and I'll show you how to take these screenshots. So in your display, on the right side in Rhino, you need to have, if you right click on it, you just need to make sure display is checked. So anywhere in here, any of these tabs, right click, and then just make sure display shows up. Just on the right side here, you have all your like layers and properties and all that. Just right click on any of these tabs up here, any of them. Right click and display. Did everyone get that? Okay, so look here. Look where my mouse is. I'm taking any of these tabs. I can right click, and then I just want to make sure I have display checked. Did everyone get this? Okay, so you can then display is in here. You select display, and then within here, you don't have to open properties every time to change display settings anymore. You can change the settings in here. So you can go in here and you can switch between wireframe, shaded, rendered, ghosted, whatever. So I'll go into Arctic, for example, or let's go into rendered. So within rendered, I can come in here and I can say, okay, well, for this screenshot, I want my background color to be black. And then it'll change this. So you want to hide this box, you just go back to populate 3D, right click on the canvas, preview off. A shortcut for preview off is Control Q. Okay, Control Q, preview on and off. So see, now the box went away. Now all you see is your little dots. Okay, and then if you want to take a screenshot of this, there's actually a really good, let's see where my notes are. File. There's a really good command in here. So type view capture to file. Okay, you can also select view capture to clipboard, which basically takes it as like a screenshot. But view capture to file will give you options. So if you select view capture to file, it will capture the window. Okay, you can select it to be a transparent background. So if you want a PNG file with a transparency with an alpha value, you can have that, or you can choose to have the color of the background in here. So you can select and deselect. And then here you can select your resolution. You can go, so resolution, if you don't want viewport, you want a high resolution. You go in here, you can select all of these preset resolutions, or you can go custom and then enter your own. Okay? So you can take screenshots directly from here. And you can, there's a way to save your view. So let's say if you've zoomed in perspective at a certain view and you want the same view for lots of different variations, you want to take the same screenshots, you can save the view and then keep coming back to it every time you go view capture to file. Really good tools to know to fasten your workflow. The other thing you can look at is a color wheel. So this is where things get interesting. So color wheel, okay? So let's see what this does. So I'm going to take the population, or actually I will take the number of points. So let's say if I have a certain number of points, so population goes in here, and then I will take this into color. See how it starts to change the color, and then I can rotate the color wheel around. You can decrease, increase saturation. You can decrease, increase luminosity within this color wheel. You can right click on it. You can go bichromatic, so you use two colors, right click on it. Trichromatic, you have a combination of three colors. Right click on it. Tetrachromatic, you have a combination of four colors. Actually, let me try something. I'm just going to make a slider for 200. Okay, and I'm going to take 200 into points because that's how many points I want. So, sorry, take it into count. Take it into count in Populate 3D, and then 200, the same thing goes into the color wheel. Yeah, this is more accurate. So if you're specifying a certain number of points, I will take the same number that goes into the count. So I have a number of points and that same number into the color wheel. And then now you can see how, you're getting all this variation of colors within the same 200 points. Any questions so far? The other thing you guys can do is, yeah, okay. Uh, uh, in here, so you just right click on it and you have choices of monochromatic, bichromatic, trichromatic, and tetrachromatic. And then there's other combinations down here that I haven't tried, complementary, triad, tetrad, I haven't tried that. But within monochromatic to tetrachromatic, you can have a lot of different variations. So trichromatic will also give you a lot of interesting variations. Yeah, no worries. Okay, so the other thing you can do in here is point list. Let's say if you need, for whatever reason, especially when it comes to fabrication and working with meshes, this comes really handy. You want to give your points a number and you want to display the number. Your vertices, you want to have a number. You want to know which point is which number. So you can take your population into points, and then now you see these numbers show up. Okay, and then you can vary the size as well. So I would make a new slider. So right now, let's see, the size is, what is the size? It's empty. So let's go 0 dot 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 0.005 dot 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 5. Okay, so I can vary the size of the numbers in here as well. Okay, and then let's maybe preview off this one, and then it just gives you the size of this, or maybe preview on, and then we reduce this, and then you can see the points with the numbers floating around in space. Okay, so this is a way to give points to these things. If you ever have a mesh and you want to know which mesh face is which number, you can select the centroid of all the faces and then give them a point list, and it'll create a number at the center of the face of any mesh that you create. We'll go over that a little bit as well. I think there's a lot of ground to cover with this. Any questions so far? Good? Okay. Let's look at what's next. The next one we're going to look at, yeah, gradient. Point, deconstruct point, and gradient. Let's see how we can play with gradients. So I'm just going to copy this thing over. I'm going to delete my color wheel. This can stay. Point list, I'm just going to disable the point list for now. Shortcut to disable is Control E. Enable and disable, Control E. Preview on and off, Control Q. Enable, disable, Control E. Okay, so let's say we want to give these dot displays, not like let's say we want a gradient of colors, not just solid colors everywhere. We want a gradient based on a certain level of information. Okay, so what we can do is we can bring in gradient. So we just bring in this gradient command, and then if you right click on it, there's different presets. There's a lot of different combinations which are already available. So let's just go with, I'll just go with the green, yellow, and red one, and you can bring in whichever one you want. So now you see on here, it's asking for a lower limit because it's a gradient. It wants to know from where to where it needs to spread the color. Lower limit being the green, upper limit being the red. And you can see how it wants to go from 0 to 1. Okay, so 0 to 1. So let's say if you had some kind of values which go from 0 to like 20,000, you have to reparametricize it to take to interpolate it between 0 to 1. So the numbers kind of have to change, and so does the relationship. And then the parameter that you're using to colorize it goes into parameters. So let's say I will do deconstruct point. So I will take this population into point, and it deconstructs each point into its x, y, and z coordinate. Okay, so let's say if I want to colorize these based on z, because we're going vertical, so let's take advantage of this height to create a gradient. So what you can use here is called bounds. Okay, bounds is a really good component because it gives you the minimum and maximum of whatever it is that you're looking at. So from Z, I will go into this, and then and this is just to demonstrate to you guys, if I put in a panel at the end of this, you can see it's going from 0.003779 to like 6.385338, okay? So what I will do is I will only plug this into the upper limit. And if I hover over it, it's taking the upper limit from that. So it's actually reading the higher value, which is 6.38. So out of all these points, my highest Z coordinate is 6.385338, and that's because of the bounding box I made. So I've put that into upper limit, and into the parameter, I'm going to put Z component. Okay, now this has become, it's working, and I will plug this into color. See that? Magic. And I'm using the Z component. So I'm using the Z axis, which is going up, to colorize my points. And it's colorizing them within those bounds. And then you can play with different gradients. Like I can take this middle slider and move it back and forth. I can maybe, let's look at a different preset. We can go into this rainbowy one, and it's using all the rainbow colors in there. Good. Okay, let's see what's next. We are going to look at facet dome. Upload 3D facet dome. Custom preview language. Okay. So next, we will disable all this. I am going to make a copy of this. Where is it still showing me? That's weird. It shouldn't still be showing me this. Huh. Yeah, it has a glitch sometimes. Like it keeps displaying things, and you just have to kind of delete it, undo it, or reload your script at that point. Anyways, okay, so I'm going to make a copy of this. You guys remember how to make a copy, right? You start dragging, and then press Alt, and it branches off. So I will delete this. Now delete color swatch. Let's just keep that in there. Okay. So I have this, I will enable these guys. So enable. And then again, I have this thing, so I will go preview on. I just want to have a look at it. And then what we will do here is we will bring in, go into mesh up here. So M for mesh. Under triangulation, there should be a facet dome. Okay, so under triangulation, or you can just type facet dome. And then before I plug anything into this, I'm going to reduce the number of points. I'll take it down all the way to maybe like yeah, 13, just somewhere in that range. And then you can take your population of points and plug this into facet dome and see how it starts to create these interesting forms. It's just using the forms to interpolate like this faceted structure. And there's no reason behind making this other than I'm just using it as an example to show the stuff that I'm doing here. But you can play with it. You can increase the number of points, and you can start, you can start to see how it becomes this like really dense structure, or you can keep it low and have it be very polygonal. So I'm just going to keep it low for now, and I will switch off my populate 3D box. So just preview off. And then here, see, when I go over pattern, it's giving me polyline curves. So when I hover over pattern, it's got 13 polyline curves. Okay, so that's what pattern is giving me is curves. And then it's also giving an untrimmed surface. We're not gonna bother with the surface for now. And then you can play with this. You can give it an optional bounding box. You can give it a different radius for your facets. We're not gonna get into that for now. We're just gonna look at pattern. So I've got lines coming out of this, so I can go geometry. I can capture all my lines in geometry. Okay, so if I go panel and I look at what's in geometry, it's just got these polyline curves. Can anyone take a guess how I can put a number in the middle of each polyline curve? Yeah, that's it. You just evaluate curve in the center or midpoint of curve, and then you can add point list to it, and then it'll give a number for each curve. So you can use that especially when you get into fabrication and those kind of things. It becomes really handy when you make models as well, complex models. Okay, so the purpose of doing this right now is we want to see how we can preview lines on line weights within Grasshopper and be able to take screenshots of those. So without having to take things into Illustrator or edit them or anything like that. So you can go in and type custom preview line weights. Okay, so I'm going to click custom preview line widths. This is part of the human shader, I believe. Yeah, so one way to find out where a component belongs is you can press Control Alt and then left click in the middle of your component, and it literally draws an arrow and a circle on the component. Control Alt, keep it pressed, and then click in the middle of the component. Control Alt, and then keep it pressed, keep your middle or your left button on your mouse clicked. Did that work for everyone? Okay, yeah, so that's one way to know where a component belongs. Okay, so geometry, I'm going to take it into geometry, and then you see how like it highlights the edges of this faceted structure. And then under shader, you can take in something like this custom color swatch. So I can enable it, Control E, take it into shader, and then you can play with different colors. You can do gradients. You can do, you can do all those kind of fun things as well. And then this is the fun stuff here, thickness. You can actually now start deciding in here. So what you do in Illustrator, you can assign thicknesses in here. So I can go, let's make a slider 0.005. dot 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 5. Okay, and then I plug this into thickness. And then you see how you're now getting this thickness in here. 0.005 is too small, but when I start increasing it, see how it starts to get thicker? As if you've applied like a pipe on the edges. And then you can go even thicker. Like my slider is limited to 5, but you can make it go even higher. Okay, and then here's the really interesting thing, absolute. I always turn this on, so you can go right click on absolute, set Boolean. Right click on absolute, set Boolean, and go true. Can anyone guess what this is? See how it kind of changed the resolution of the thickness? Can anyone guess? Kind of. Yeah, you're on the right track. It aligns with the resolution of your screen. So when you take a screen capture or you do that, I was showing you that, uh, how did we do that again? It was like the way you take this, yeah, view capture to file. It you get you're actually aligning the thickness of the lines with your screen and your capture, and it stays consistent. So because if I don't have absolute selected as yes, when I zoom in and out, my line thicknesses will change, right? But now it kind of stays consistent. And if I go false, yeah, depending on like the see how it starts to get thicker when I zoom out, when I have absolute turned off. But when absolute is turned on, it stays true to the resolution that you have. So if you need to take, view capture to file screenshots, turning absolute to yes or true is the way to go with this. There's something else I want to show you guys. I'm just going to see how this thing works. Boundary curves for hatch objects. So axis, line. Yeah, okay. So let's have a look at this component called gradient hatch. Okay, so I'll do this again. So gradient hatch, so you have boundaries, so it's asking for boundary curves for hatch objects. So, you have this like faceted curves, so I'm going to put the same curves in here. And then axis, you can actually specify an axis for your gradient, okay? So I can either specify, I can pick points from this thing, or I can just go set one line and I can just draw a line that goes straight, and then it starts to give you this gradient on here. It's pretty light, but let's say if we change the color one to this, yeah, so color one is blue. You can specify like a start color and end color, and it'll actually give you these gradients across the surface of it. And it's just quick for colorations, diagramming. If you want to show a certain color on a building, you want to show certain gradients on certain buildings, you can use these kind of tools. So that was gradient hatch. Let's see what we have next. Yeah, gradient hatch, we already looked at it. Oh, you can have a dash pattern. So let's say if we want a dash pattern, I'm just to simplify things, I am going to disable all this. Something going on with my card. So you can have a dash pattern and you can select your curves, put it in dash pattern, and then you need to give a collection of pattern as a list. that's not it. I had it before. Yeah, okay. So you can actually have, you can bring in, let's say another like, let's say you want to have a dash pattern, for graphics. And there's a lot of other things you can do with lines. So again, I'll go between 0.005 dot 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 5. Let's just see what happens. And then if I increase this, you can see like I start getting these dashes. Can you guys see the dashes? Great. Yeah, now you can see it. Right? So now I'll decrease it and then it'll play with the values a bit. And then what this actually does is you can actually use this to like create handrails and those kind of things. So within here, the dashes and gaps are real, like they're physical objects within this digital space. So the dashes, I can actually go extrude, and I can actually extrude my dashes. Let's say I want to go in the Z direction. You can specify custom vectors in here. See how I can actually extrude my dashes, and then you can separately extrude your gaps as well. So if I want to do something here, I'm just trying things out. I'm going to put gaps in a different extrusion, and then I will I will bring in custom preview, and then I'll put this one into this. I will put this one into this. I will turn off my extrusions because you just want to view this one. And then I'm just going to give them each like a unique color. And then yeah, here you can play with those dashes. I use this a lot for like handrails and those kind of things. Like if I want to have yeah, if I'm drawing stuff for a building, I'll select a curve and I'll just use this. Any questions so far? What's that? Your dash isn't working? Number slide is going into pattern, and then curves, my geometry is going into curves. I disabled my geometry that was, yeah, the solid lines that were going into the dash pattern. So whatever's downstream or upstream of your dash pattern, you can just, turn the preview off. So Control Q on those things, and then you'll be able to see your dash pattern. The only thing I have enabled is my dash pattern and my custom preview right now. Did you get it? No? What did you guys not get? Did you also turn off Facet Dome? And also turn off Populate 3D? What's overlaying on top of what? What's your line weight? What is it exactly? Or like 0.2 maybe? Yeah, so you need to turn off the solid lines. You want to see the dashes? Oh yeah, I have all that. Yeah, there you go. You have the No, it won't go into custom preview line. Look at my components. I'm taking my dashes and I'm actually extruding them. So each like the dash and the gap and extrude. You can take it into custom preview line if that's what you want to do. And we do have new dashes showing up. Reduce your size. And you can increase it or reduce it. Yeah. Z. Okay, we're going to learn how to apply materials using Grasshopper. So let's make our own surface. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a couple of lines. I'm just going to go into wireframe for this. I'm going to make a control point curve. Okay, and I'm just going to do like a random thing. And then I will copy this over. And then I will just move my points to vary this a bit. Okay, and then I'm going to move it over one more time. I'm going to vary this again. So you can just pick your control points. You can move things around. Just whatever, just random. It doesn't need to be exactly what I'm doing. Okay, and then we're going to use the loft command. And what component will I use to bring the curves in? Yeah, you can. I just like, I, I don't know, geometry is a bit more generic. So I'll use that. Okay, and then I'll copy it over 3 times. You don't have to copy it over 3 times, but I'm just gonna do it anyways. Actually, yeah, so you can copy it over 3 times. But I will show you a way to, yeah, actually, you know what? Yeah, keep it copied over 3 times. I'm gonna go select one of them, right click, set one geometry, select the first one, right click on the second one, set one geometry, select the second one, right click on the third one, set one geometry, select the third one. And then when you loft in Grasshopper, the order matters. You have to make sure you're plugging in things in the correct order. So you could either plug it in like this, press shift, and then you can have multiple components going into the same thing and see how it's lofting. Or a cleaner way of doing this is using the merge command, where things are visible. and then you just bring in your data into the merge. And then as you're going, you can actually press this plus button on the merge component to add more, receptors, add more plugs. And then you can take this. I like to keep my script nice and neat. You can take this into curves, and then here you go. And then if you ever want to play with Loft Options, you actually have to select the Loft Options component and plug that into options, and then you can play with these different options in here. Okay, I'm not going to go into that right now, but you can play with that a little bit. It's pretty simple stuff. Okay, so now we want to, oh, and then inside Rhino, I'm just going to select the curves I drew, and I'm going to type hide, because I just don't want anything visually obstructing my thing. So hide inside Rhino, the curves that I built. Now I want to preview this, so I'm going to go custom preview, plug the loft into geometry, and there's a lot of stuff happening in here right now. So I just moved into a shaded view. There's a lot of stuff happening in here, so I will turn off preview for loft, and then turn off preview for all your curves and the merge component. Okay, now you just have this. Now let's say I want to assign I want to be able to assign like custom materials to this, like textures within using Grasshopper, and I want to have selections and all that. So for that you use this component called a material table. And by no means is this an alternative to a rendering engine. Your renders at the end still need to be done, properly, but this is good to have a custom preview. If you want to have materials applied in your screenshots and part of your diagramming, you don't have to render things and spend all that time. You can just do that within here. Okay, so you can come into this, and then what we're going to do here is we're going to add this button here for update. So every time I add new textures into Rhino, I want this to update using this button. Okay, so it's just a button component, and every time I press it, it's going to activate or refresh this. And then let's bring in a panel. Material name goes into panel, and then it's showing me I have two materials here. Okay, so now watch this. Inside Rhino, where you have all your tabs, I'm going to go into materials. Okay, materials. Now I already have African teak and oak light added here. If you don't have anything, then just follow this. Just you can go into create new material, import from material library, or there's some presets here. I usually go into import from material library, and then let's maybe bring in some metal. We're going to bring in Corten, Corten Rusty. Okay. Now what it does is it adds Corten Rusty here, but see how in my panel I still only have African teak and oak light. So I click this button, and it should update. Why is it not updating? Yeah, that didn't work for me either. Should work. Let me try something. Oh yeah, you're right. It needs to be Boolean toggle. Yes, good catch. Boolean toggle, true. Actually, no, that's not working either. Let's try to bring something else in. We're going to go into metal. Nope, it's not working. Okay, I'm gonna bring this in one more time. Okay, there's something not right here. Base surface, base surface. Is it working for you guys? Really? Okay, let me look into this because it was working. Don't know why. Hmm. Okay, I will look into this and I'll get back to you guys on that. But there are a couple of other tools we can look at in the meantime. Okay, let's have a look at those in the meantime. That is really weird. Um, so we're gonna look at mesh normals, how you can quickly view a geometry using mesh normals. So mesh normals, so right now we have this geometry as a surface, right? So we have an untrimmed surface. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go mesh surface. So what mesh surface does, it gives you, it creates a mesh. Does anyone understand the difference between surface and meshes? You guys, did you guys get taught this stuff in graphics? A little bit? You guys know what NURBs are? Sorry? NURBs are what are used for surfaces and polysurfaces. NURBs are curves. NURBs are basic, it's a formula. It's like a calculus formula that creates a smooth surface. Okay? Mesh, and we're gonna go in here and say preview mesh edges. Okay, so what I've done is I've taken my loft, which is a surface, and if I disconnect it, you can see like the loft itself, and then preview on. See how it's nice and smooth, right? It's because that smoothness, these are called, NURBS curves. It's coming from these NURBS curves that allow it to be a smooth surface. I'm not going to go too much into detail. And then you also have super NURBS, which are used for like car design, and when you have, this Ferrari and Lamborghini, and those are designed with really smooth NURBS curves. There's different types of curves. So a mesh is basically a surface, but polygonal. It cuts up the surface into U and V coordinates, into basically like these quads, or you can even have triangles. Um, and it does it at the cost of smoothness. But in fabrication, or in the fabrication world, you use meshes a lot to create, to take objects and then make them in physical space. So you can use NURBS, but it just gives you a really heavy model because it's a lot of formulas, a lot of mathematics processing going on in the background. So a good example of someone using meshes to create complex geometries is the very many. If you look at Mark Fornez's work, if you've been to Edmonton, you may have seen this. He uses meshes to rationalize and fabricate these forms. And the way these forms are fabricated, he's taking nothing but, you can see on this right side, it's strips. He's taking strips of aluminum. He's just cutting like long strips, and he's putting them together and riveting them. So he's got layers and layers of strips. That's how these are done. And these are basically, he's using meshes to create complex surfaces that cannot otherwise be created unless you 3D print them, build them on a CNC. He's just using a fabrication technique to make them look really unique. Um, this may possibly be a course in the future that I teach here. It'll be called complex forming, but he's using these really complex, kangaroo-based forms, and he's laser cutting strips of aluminum, and he's putting them together. That's how these are made, and you can kind of see it. And see how it's kind of polygonal, but overall it's giving you the form. That's basically what he's doing. So let's have a look at this. So if I hide my poly surface that's being converted into a mesh, see how now it's not so smooth, and it's got these rectangles. But rectangles being 4 vertices doesn't mean they're planar. You can run them through a simulation in Kangaroo within Grasshopper, and you can planarize all your rectangles. I'll give you guys a tutorial on that in the future, not today, but just want to highlight the difference between these. And then you can play with the U count and V count. So right now it's 5 by 5. Maybe if I want a higher resolution, then I just need to add more rectangles, right? So I'll go maybe 0 dot 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 5 dot 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 dot. Let's just go till 50. But the more I do, the heavier it gets. The more rectangles I have, the heavier my model will be. So right now it's at 5. I can increase it, and you can see how it starts to have more resolution and therefore more smoothness. So the fundamental difference between polysurfaces and meshes is that a mesh is basically a surface with the loss in resolution. Okay, but it doesn't originate from the same way that a polysurface will. Polysurfaces uses a mathematical formula, give you these really smooth surfaces. So you can see the difference when you overlay them. So when I reduce my number slider on the mesh, you can start to see how it goes, it starts to depart from the actual polysurface. Go into display, preview mesh edges. Did you guys get it? Good. Lots of fun stuff in all these menus in Grasshopper. You can change the background color of your canvas. You can have your wires showing up in different colors. You can customize it for yourself. Okay, so let's look at how we can colorize it. So what we're going to do is we're gonna deconstruct it and then reconstruct it. Okay, so and I'll show you why. So you go deconstruct mesh. So when you deconstruct a mesh, it's like deconstructing VREP. Okay, it'll give when you deconstruct a mesh, it'll give you vertices, so all your points. And this is fundamentals of meshes. Okay, vertices are your points. Faces are the faces created by the vertices. Each vertex is basically a point which has coordinates. Faces contains a list of the points that are used, so it also creates a sublist of coordinates. And then you have colors, so it gives you mesh vertex colors if your mesh already has colors, and then you have normals. So we're going to reconstruct this mesh. Where's my reconstruct? Construct. Yeah, yeah. Construct mesh. Okay, you select that. You plug in vertices, plug in faces, but for colors, I'm actually going to use normals. If you've ever seen like in Maya 3ds Max, you have this like iridescent view sometimes of your models. There's a name for the shader. The shader uses mesh normals to color it. It's pretty cool actually. And then here you can start to see. It'll start giving you these this really cool like coloration, and then you can change it. You can actually instead of colors coming from normals, you can actually bring in gradients as well. So if I go display, I turn off my preview mesh edges, you just have this colored mesh. I love these colors. Like I use these colors a lot when I preview geometries. I can add I can add my own custom gradients in here, but this is basically using mesh normals. So all your normals of your points of your vertices are being used to colorize this, and it's by default it uses this color scheme. So I can go into rendered view and I can see this. There's a way to turn off this plane. Let me move up my loft. Okay, everyone clear up to this point? Yeah. Okay, and then there's just a way to add this. I'm just gonna bring this in here. You know what? Why not just give it a shot? Let's just say. So I don't want to use my mesh normal colors. I want to use my own custom colors. So I can go bring in a gradient. I'm going to use a certain preset. I'm going to deconstruct point. Vertices go in here. Um, and then in order to get a range from this, do you guys remember the component we used? Range. Or actually, we can use a different one in here called bounds, which gives you the plus and minus of it. So use bounds. Let's just go with maybe, because it's got these undulations, we're going to go with Z. Okay, so let's see what happens if we use the Z-axis, because it's got these really cool undulations. I will put the domain into upper limit, because it will take the higher number of my domain. So within the Z, my Z values of all the vertices on this mesh go from 1.97 to 35.18. So I want to use that entire range, okay? So I'm taking the Z into the upper limit, and I'll keep my lower limit at 0, because I just want to use that for my coloration. And then in parameter, can you guys guess what goes into parameter? Or do you remember? then I will take this into colors. So see how where my Z is lowest, it gives me a green color because the green is at 0. You guys understand? So I'm actually using my gradient to find out how it relates within the Z-axis. You know, you can do the same thing for Y, you can do the same thing for X. Then you can use different color combinations in here as well. And you can also use this for building heights, for example. If you want to use your building heights as a parameter to have a gradient going from smallest building to biggest building, where the biggest building is the highest color within this gradient, you can also use the same logic within that, which I think is very effective as a diagramming exercise. Okay, any questions? You guys know how to animate sliders? What? Come on, guys. Okay, all right. Right click on the slider and go animate. Okay, and then you can select where you want to save the images. Okay, so when you animate, it doesn't give you an animation file. It doesn't give you an MP4 file, or it doesn't give you a GIF. It gives you frame by frame pictures. And then you have a sequence of images from start to finish. It's numbered properly. You just need to use something like a Photoshop or a website like Giphy, or there's a really quick tutorial on YouTube on how to use Adobe Premiere Pro to create videos or GIFs using a sequence of images. Okay, and then you can select your resolution in here. You can select your viewport, and then frame count is really important because it needs to correlate to the number slider. So how many frames per like number slider are you? It's the smoothness of your animation. So you have to play with that a little bit to find what works, and then use that. Okay, and then when you go OK, it just kind of, you'll see it like going from start to finish on your slider. Like it animates on its own. It produces a bunch of images that you can use to create your animation. And you can have like the same slider with multiple values as well. If you want to have multiple things being animated, you can only animate one slider at a time, but you can use the same slider to parametricize different values within whatever it is that you're trying to animate. I'm weirded out by how this is just not working. False. This is bullshit. Okay. Questions? Sorry? Uh-huh. So you got to switch off the one. This one is on. You've got everything else switched off. Delete. Oh, okay. There's a built-in glitch in Grasshopper. Sometimes it keeps custom preview on without you turn them off. You almost have to delete it and then reinsert those components. Even if, so you have to disable custom preview. So custom preview, if you turn preview off on custom preview, it doesn't go off. You have to disable the component. Yeah, and I remember I was having the same issue. So you almost have to delete it and then reinsert it. No, 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 not the whole thing. The thing custom preview for this. No, no, no. Control Z. It's just a glitch in Grasshopper. These things really confusing. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna do another tutorial with you guys. Um, I will find out what's going on with this material table thing. I don't know, honestly. Yeah, and have a look at some of these other like render things on here. There's this really cool tool you can use, render text to screen. You can have some kind of text, like if I put in a panel, I put XYZ, it will show it on the screen, and then you have to give it a location. So let's say if I go, I construct a point which is at 0, 0.0.0, and then size of text, let's say 12. Where is it? Yeah, it should be working. There's something up with these components because this should be working as well. Okay, I'm gonna look into this component as well. But basically, like to give you guys an idea on what it does, so you see where the point is. Let's say if you're taking screenshots and you want to display different values or what's coming out from that screenshot, you can have those things coming into the text value, and then it'll just show up on your screen every time. So that's the purpose of this. I'll look into this a bit more. I'm going to do another tutorial with you guys maybe this week, but probably next week also on data trees and data management in Grasshopper. Have you guys looked into data trees and all that? Plenty of tutorials on YouTube, guys. But I'll go through it with you as well. Any questions so far with this? Can I stop recording?